Built on Green Tree, Ken Mastrole is with us, and I believe by the performance of the quarterback for the University of Miami, he'll probably be with us every week, and he'll be here regardless anyways, but just that guy's playing at Cam Ward's playing at a you know what's funny, Ken? Even when he doesn't play his best game, we're still talking about how good he is.
I know. And it's fun to talk about a guy like this because we're not talking about some just guy that sits in the pocket and delivers just routine balls. It's exciting to watch him, and this is perfect timing to talk about this guy.
The crazy thing is like, all right, 2 picks, probably a play he'd want back in terms of like the first fumble, although you do get the pop pass or the two-handed basketball chest pass out of desperation, the Riley Williams. Like, you don't get one without the other. But at the end of the day, not a couple of plays, I guess you could say, that we had not seen from him. And yet at the end of the day, we're still talking about 3 straight scores to end the game, rushes for a touchdown, 340 yards, 4 touchdowns, and they're still talking about him being in New York for the Heisman. I mean, it's absurd, the level at what he is playing at and what he has done to change the narrative of that position at this school for this team this season.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing exceptionally well. Obviously, he went on a little bit of a run towards the end, and it was a combination. I think they got a little bit away from maybe the run game. Virginia Tech did some really good things. There were a couple key errors and turnovers where I think it was 4 straight drives where they got basically either stopped or had a turnover. But it just kind of shows the resilience of Cam Ward and his kind of wizardry, how he just kind of pulls it off at the end and wills the team to win. I mean, with some of those plays, when you had to have it at the most, that's what your exceptional players do.
Well, let's start here. So let's just start with this, because we were talking earlier today, is number one, probably, I'm guessing in hindsight, people overlook Virginia Tech, right? And that number one would be who their head coach is. And then give me your assessment of their personnel, because at the end of the day, there's some guys that we'll be seeing playing professionally.
Yeah, so Brent, the head coach he's a defensive guy. He was successful at Penn State. He had a very aggressive defense, a very sound defense, and a lot of good players, and they drafted well. Or not drafted well, but they recruited well. Now, he's recruited really well in some of the position players that they have. So if you look at their front, they've got guys across the board in all 3 layers that have all conference honors, guys that you're going to see playing on Sundays. And it's those 2 bookends at corner that are really good. So what you see in Virginia Tech, if you go back and look from a kind of a schematics and from a personnel standpoint, is they've got the guys up front. All right, they don't have a big bulldozing guy, but there's a guy that can get pressure. They've got an end who's like a Micah Parsons type of player, that 52, who can get pressure, who can push, who can spin. So he disrupts a lot, gets on that edge. And then their linebackers are very rangy. So they're in that 6'2", 6'3" range. They're 215 to 220-ish range. So they're long and they can cover a lot of ground and field. And then you've got the 2 tall corners and the very aggressive safety. So you put all that together and you've got a veteran group that is very athletic. You can do some things defensively where you're locking up man-to-man, getting Cam to hopefully hold the ball a little bit longer, but they're really good at mixing things up. So there were times when they would bring 4 linemen and they'd rush just linebacker and play like a man concept to the boundary. And then to the field side, they're going to kind of read routes. And that's where 2 of those picks happened, where they were reading the routes and the corners just kind of fell off and made a good play. And Cam just made it, poor decision. But that just happens when you're playing quarterback and you're throwing the ball a lot and you're moving the team down the field. You're going to run into sometimes these errors, and they're going to win the chess match on you. And that's what they do really well. But from a personnel standpoint, I mean, that was a battle because those guys did an exceptional job. You never saw like Miami was just dominating on offense all the time. It got into a chess match, and they just made the right plays at the right time. And in critical moments, Dawson called some really good plays that just kind of put it over the edge, right? Like there were probably 5 or 6 plays, I'd say, throughout that game where they were big time difference makers. So one of them, the wide open play action on 3rd and 1 for the touchdown, basically the one where the guy at the end of the game winning score, where he motioned him in and then whipped him back out, and Cam just kind of hit that guy in the flat. That was a great call. And those were some of the key calls in the game.
Well, that last call, right, and talking to you and talking to Chad Wilson, I don't have enough time in my life to do this, but you both noted the same thing, which was that came out of an NFL. I'm not saying it came from an NFL playbook, but it came in an NFL game at a very noteworthy time from a very impressive offensive system in the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I think when you watch a lot of football, like especially quarterbacks or guys that play, and myself, a lot of guys they or any position, probably Chad as well. Like you just remember, you have like this photographic memory of things that happen. And when I saw that play, I thought, I know Kansas City did that sometime, somewhere. And then I remember it being in the Super Bowl. It was the walk-off touchdown where McCole Hardman motioned in. So it was a little like Andy Reid-esque, on that play, but it was just a great call at a great time. They knew they were going to get that man-to-man matchup, motioned them in, and the guy sold it and got out there, and it's the game-winning score right there.
I mean, Horton left the DB. He left him on. The DB had no. I don't know if you know. I actually talked to Chad about this. I'm like, how are you supposed to play that? Because the DB completely lost Horton, and he ran a great route, but just lost him.
Yeah, I think the tendency a lot of times for defenders is whenever you're going to see a guy start his motion, you think he's going to go across the formation, right? So you get used to seeing that and being like, that's what's going to happen. I just need to make sure I trail him.
So I got to get to the other side.
I got to get to the other side, but I got to clear, make sure I don't run into anybody. So I'm kind of conscious of where, the backers are, or I'm running the line. And as soon as that guy goes in across the formation, he may have lost him a little bit, behind the line. And then he just whips back out and goes. So that change of direction of that reaction, that's just the receiver knows what he's doing. But the DB, when he reacts, it's probably a half a step or two steps too late.
Well, in this particular, I think it was more than that. I mean, he wasn't even in the frame, and I was sitting down on like the 5-yard line watching that play. I mean, he lost his lever. He really had bad eye discipline, which is what they kind of say, right? He had lost Horton. But what I do think is awesome about what I'm doing, and I'm just going to brag on myself, is that in 2 separate conversations, I talked to Chad Wilson earlier, and I'm talking to you today. Both of you said almost the same thing in terms of how a DB is taught to play that, which is A, once you come in motion, your goal is to get to the other side. But B, you don't want to interfere with the linebackers. And C would be the route by the receiver. So I'm glad I guess you guys know ball. I guess I made some good choice. I made some good picks.
Yeah, I think Chad knows a little bit of ball.
He knows a little bit of ball. Hey, something interesting I thought you said, something I noticed being field level, and you talked about it, was the cornerbacks for Virginia Tech, and really their whole secondary. But it was more challenging for the Miami receivers. So we talked about against USF, all right, they loaded up the box, played man on the back end, bad decision, right? Quote, bad decision. And it did not work out, right? And we sat here, Chad, KC, and Rod have discussed it. We discussed it on the pregame show for radio. Like, what do you do against Cam Ward? Florida got beat on some zone stuff, right, with him scrambling around. USF decided to go man. They got beat. And I think Virginia Tech, now look, it's one thing to call it. It's the other thing to execute it, which is A, they were able to get pressure, and B, able to cover on the back end. So they complemented each other. But I did notice that Virginia Tech's DBs were the most challenging that Miami had faced so far this year in terms of how the game played out.
Yeah, those are 2 really good corners. I mean, 2 corners we're going to probably see playing on Sunday at some point. Those are guys that were all conference players. And like I said, they're rangy, big, good eye discipline, good. They just kind of understood, like, very well disciplined in how they play the position. So in those 2 interceptions, let's talk about the first one, the trips to the right in the red zone. They line up in a 3-by-1 formation. They got 3 receivers to the right. They're running a double post, and they've got Restrepo running a wheel. The inside DB, the number 2 receiver, he starts playing like he's man-to-man concept. And then as Restrepo starts to break that thing up the sideline, Cam sees it. I'm sure he saw the DB as he's throwing it and going, it's one of those ones you want to put I don't have a string on it, and I can't pull it back.
Mastrole did not teach me how to not throw the ball.
Right, exactly. So the guy made a great play. He recognized it, passed it off, knowing he probably had safety help in the middle, and then was able to make a play on the ball. Those things happen at times. And unfortunately, it was a critical time in the red zone. And, Miami's operating at 92% in the red zone, which is unbelievable. And that's why they're winning games, And then the second one was a sail route concept where you've got a go route on the outside and you've got a sail by Restrepo on the outside. And he's going to break that thing 15 to 18 yards. It's a deeper route. So you're trying to get, as an outside receiver, you're trying to get the hips turned on the corner, and the quarterback's going to read basically pre-snap coverage, and then he's going to look at the corner to see, is he going to turn his butt to the boundary and run? And if he does, so you had that basically that linebacker, that nickel defender, or the safety that was down, and he kind of worked with Restrepo as he went vertical, and then
Correct.
just went towards the flat.
And
So he had to get
right,
it
he
over the
sat. He
top.
basically sat.
Yeah, he sat and he tried to kind of like knock him off his route a little bit, which those guys are taught to do. But Cam threw that ball, and the ball placement was a little bit inside, so it would have been a great catch and throw.
Oddly
But he
enough,
threw.
if Al does what he's typically done, which you have raved about his ball placement, if his ball play, what's one thing that it was a bad decision, but also if he actually makes a better throw, if he makes a Cam Ward like throw, more than likely it's not an interception because the ball's either going to go over Restrepo's outside shoulder and to the sideline. It just so happens that, as you said, Virginia Tech's reading routes. So the guy who was on, I think that might have been Jacoby. I think that was Jacoby,
It was
right?
it was the corner.
So he's the one that falls off,
He
essentially reads
falls
the
off.
route, and then of course the ball is also thrown kind of to the inside, and that's made it somewhat easier for him.
Yeah, they were able to volleyball it. Basically, if you get to the NFL, though, they call it volleyball. If you can pop the ball up, there's a chance the defense is going to make a play and pick it off. So, yeah, the ball placement, but the corner did a good job, and he's reading it, waiting, like, and he's keying number one, who's the outside receiver, but he's seeing what number two is doing, knowing that, like, if that guy breaks a post or goes anything inside, you've got middle of the field help, you've got safety help. Because actually, on that play on the backside, they brought some type of pressure. They brought a linebacker, or they played a single high look, and they were just able to get in there and get some pressure. He got it out, and unfortunately, it was a pick.
Probably get Cam I mean, Cam's a pretty big film guy, but in a way, maybe gets him spending an extra few minutes this week. You never know.
Yeah, I think he's going to get back into it, and a guy like
I don't
that
think
has
he
got.
wasn't into it. I just think that it's always good to have a little bit of a refresher, a little wait,
Yeah.
a little
Oh,
like, hey, all right, there's my dip. Let's lock in.
yeah. I mean, as a former guy that played and seen a lot of this, you're going to make those mistakes. You're going to make those throws. It's just how he bounces back, which is like, that's the
Well,
encouraging part, right? Like
the
it's.
thing you noted, Ken, is that the great ones, they don't let the game affect them. They don't let the negatives in the game affect them, that they press on, which I know this coaching staff, that was such a huge thing when they recruited Cam Ward, was not letting, part of my language, not letting the shit affect him. That he would not get down. He would not get bothered, and he would press on. And they loved that about him. And I think it was very evident that they came to the forefront in this game against Virginia Tech. And you said the great ones are ones who can stay focused and stay in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what he did. I mean, you see, he's always on the iPad, he's always going back. It's like next play mentality. We're in this fight. He's a guy that understands, like, this is a four-quarter game. Like, anything can happen. We're down by 10. We got to keep battling. Even though they got stopped 4 drives, there's no pressing. It's just like, let's get to the next play. Let's execute. Let's keep everybody kind of in tune to be disciplined and the work that you put in. And it's easy. It's all a lot of coach speak and saying, "Hey, keep next play, next play." But I think you're seeing that. Well, you definitely are seeing that from him. That it's like, I'm just going to move on. I'm going to stay calm because the guys are looking at me to see how I respond. But I'm just going to play on. But a part of that too comes from the coaches got to trust you, like, and you got to trust the coaches. A lot of younger guys these days and age, they're going to feel like they're going to get pulled, or, hey, when's the next guy going up? But Cam's got so much experience. You're too good of a player to do that.
Well, Shannon Dawson said today, we're taping this on a Monday. Shannon Dawson said today, and I've talked to him a bunch of times, and I really love his outlook on coaching and how like he said today, essentially, like, mistakes happen. I'm a realist. I get it. No game is perfect, but more so it's how you respond to the mistakes that you can control. Like, I'm not going to lose my mind over a mistake. It's part of the game. I played the position. It's going to happen. It's what happens next. But the other thing I thought he said that was great is that, and this is in relation to Cam Ward, right? Like, we talked about this throughout the year. Like, yeah, there's some things he does that might drive some coaches crazy, but at the end of the day, if you trust him and understand what makes him go, then to get the good, you accept the quote bad. And as Shannon Dawson put it, like, you can't love your players in slices, which I thought was a great quote, which just means I love all of him and I want all of it. And I'm good with it. And I think
Right.
that level of trust, and I really think the trust and the non-second guessing. Like Shannon Dawson doesn't second, and I think that's the realistic nature, his very rational outlook, almost like a on life and how he applies it to sport. And he doesn't.
No, I think that's exceptional that he coaches that way because it's got to trickle all the way down to like the high school level, right? Even up, we see that at the pro level. But you trust the guy that you know is going to put in that work. He's probably seen how much time he puts into like game preparation,
Ken, he's there.
watching film,
He's the first player in the.
right? So when you've got a guy like that, it's like, and he's talented and you know what you have behind center, you got to let him just run with it. You got to let him, you got to hand over the offense to him. You coach him still because guys that want to be pros, they want to be coached hard. All right. The pros will tell you they want to be coached hard. And guys like that, they want to be pressed and they want to be pushed and they want to get better every single time. But he knows that like if I try to put little things on him where he can't do this or I tell him he can't do that, you're not going to let him play as free and do some of the
Probably
magical
also if you
things that
just
that does.
restrictive, right? If there's some sort of restrictive nature of the conversation, right? Or, hey, listen, I don't like this, or don't do this, or you know how that goes. It's like I think in life, it's like if you have a manager who trusts you, right, you are going to sort of empower yourself to do good things. And if you have someone who you're scared, I mean, you can be scared of not producing, right, and have that kind of pride in your work. But if you're scared of always making a mistake versus being empowered to do well, and there's an understanding that on that journey there might be a slip up, but there's an inherent level of believe in you, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, there is. And I think you're just seeing that all around with the way that he's been coaching them, the way you can see the demeanors on the sideline and the way they
Well, I
kind
can
of
tell you this on the sideline too is there are times where Cam Ward's sitting with Shannon Dawson and the analyst, and there's times where Cam Ward will literally take the iPad, leave his position. You know how everyone sort of sits by position. He'll leave and he'll go sit in the middle of the wide receivers, and he'll tell them what they, what went wrong, what we're going to do different. If you see this on the next play, expect, what I mean? Like he controls the deal.
yeah,
He controls the deal.
and that's why Miami's going to continue to get better throughout the season. Hopefully there's not a slippage or anything like that. But good players are great players. Like they identify what they're doing fundamentally, right? Incorrect or schematically where we had a breakdown. And then they're going to take that to this next week and they're going to work on that. So whether that be in the team period or that be in an individual session or after practice, guys like that, I guarantee are going to go out and they're going to perfect what the next thing is, right? If I missed a throw or there's something that I need to continue to work on, it's identifying it. It's easy to go in and watch film on the next day, Saturday morning after the game and say, oh, we didn't do this right or that. We'll hit it on Monday or Tuesday. But I guarantee those guys with that veteran leadership, they're looking at like we talked about the nuances of the play, right? What did we do wrong here that we know is going to take, because that's what ultimately is going to bring you to that national championship stage or to that playoff stage is you've got to execute the fundamentals throughout the entire course of the season. That's the biggest thing.
There's one other thing Shannon Dawson said today, and I bring this up only because you mentioned it, which is Shannon has mentioned this to me, right? Is at the end of the day, you, as a play caller, everyone expects you have the perfect play call in every play. That is not reality either. There are times when the guy on the other side has a good counter, right? He's got a good call for your call. At the end of the day, it comes down to, hey, it might be a negative play, right? They get you, or it's like as Shannon Dawson said, hey, Cam Ward or whoever, go make a play. Like it sounds really simplistic, but it just hey, when you know what hits the fan, someone make a play. And I
Right.
thought kind of in the second half, especially, what happened in that regard was Cam used his legs. Like they brought pressure and they covered on the back end, but at the end of the day, they left the middle of the field open, and Cam took advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean that's the X factor, his legs. I mean, when you saw the way the offense was kind of operating was a little bit up and down. They'd hit some chunk plays, they'd go backwards, they'd stall out on a drive. They didn't go out there and score, 65 points and just punt it once, if even that. This game, there was a battle, on both sides of the ball. And like he said, he's exactly right. You're going to call your best plays. You're going to set up. You're going to call some plays like 4 or 5 plays during that game that are going to be so key and critical. But for most of the time, the defense is going to win sometimes too. And then, like you said, you just hope that like the guys that you
Like, you
recruited,
can't coach Cam Ward to make the play to Riley Williams. Like, that's not something that is coached. That's just he's got it, and so does Riley Williams in that regard too. But like, you don't draw that play up in the meeting
no,
room.
that's experience. That's not even practicing that like in the summertime. That's just experience and just like
Honestly, that's the difference.
creativity.
That's the difference between the great ones and not. Like, some just have it and some don't. And there's no explanation for it.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I heard a thing the other day about NFL, and a guy was talking about players that you pay, and there's like 5% of the league that you've got guys on the team that are just like they're just dominant,
Difference
right?
maker. That's
They're
why they get the
difference
money.
maker. Yep. I mean, you've got like on the line, you've got a guy like that just paid like CD Lamb, could be a game breaker. So Cam Ward's a guy that's like at any time, like he can break it wide open for you.
Dude,
It might be
he's
a
worth. I don't
throw.
know what he got paid. He's worth every penny.
I don't
Right?
know. Yeah. I mean, I don't
He's a
know.
difference
Yeah.
maker. He's a
Percent.
difference. He's worth it. He's whatever it is. He's worth it. That's that end of the story, and that's to your NFL point, right? Like, I don't know, the salary cap's tilted, and it is probably tilted in favor of the guys who are the difference makers, and they eat up a large chunk of the cap.
Yeah.
Same
I'm
deal.
sure it wasn't a couple extra pairs of Adidas shoes or maybe like some
No,
coupons
the
too.
bank account. I'm sure the bank account is fine. Now, speaking of which, now that we've gotten through all that, there were a couple of throws in that game that I don't know how you take it, because this is like you looking at art. Like, this is me looking at going in a museum and going, "Hey, babe, that's a cool piece of art." And then someone up coming behind me saying, "You see the brush strokes and the feathering and the colors they use." So, like, for me as quarterback play, there were a couple of throws in that game. The first touchdown, the Jacoby George in the back of the end zone, that thing was a pro throw. But that's how I see it. How did you see it?
Yeah, it was a great throw. I mean, the first throw that they had was called a fork route. They had a corner with a post. And they said a single high safety. Well, no, it was man to man. And Cam just saw the safety turn his hips to go to the corner, and he knew that the corner would be trailing the post. And he just threw an absolute line
Beat
drive,
a dart.
a dart, and it was right on him. And that's 6 points. And then that one where he floats it over for the tight end
To
in
Cam
the back of the
McCormick.
end zone. That was I mean, a simple throw, but a great throw with great touch. Because if you throw it too hard, it's out of the end zone
Yep.
or the guy's not catching it. So those kind of throws that he made, we did, the sidearm stuff and slicing the defense. But, I think the ones that he'll probably want to have back or work on there was like a tunnel screen. And it's that little touch ball. It's almost like in basketball, you got like the old school, like Wilt Chamberlain, like finger roll, or the Kareem
Right.
Abdul-Jabbar skyhook type of throw where it's that soft touch. And that guy could have been maybe running for days. I'm sure he's looking at that saying, I got to get that over the line. Maybe that's a throw I'm going to work on over
You're talking about
nets this week.
that's the play where they motioned out the running back, Chris Johnson, who's fast, and he tried to get it over the little slip delay and had the
Yes.
screen. Yeah.
And then and it just didn't.
They ran that
They
last
knocked
week
it
too.
down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are throws but he's got all the throws, like all levels of throws you can see on film or on display. He's obviously got the sidearm. He can get it out quick, fastball. He can throw that two ball. He can layer it over the top. So the guy is a passer, right? That's what you want. You want a gifted passer when you're recruiting a quarterback, and he shows that he's got all those physical traits.
We'll say this, and there's one more thing we're going to get to, and then we're going to wrap this up, which is you making basketball analogies, and I know I'm going to mention a name, and people are just going to roll their eyes, and I'm going to mention Michael Jordan, and I'm not putting him in the same like relative category to how Michael Jordan, is regarded in the NBA, but it's more so to the fact that if Michael Jordan was on your team, if he was having a bad game, I don't think anyone would ever lost faith in Michael Jordan, and you would want him on the floor taking the last shot in the fourth quarter. And to me, that's what Cam Ward is to Miami. That regardless of how it went at the beginning, you want him on the field in the fourth quarter when the game matters to make the play, and he's going to do it. And to me, that's as much as anything about what we talked before about divvying up the pie. Like, he's different. He's just different, and has to do with his ability and his makeup. Because if you talk, all the stories about Michael Jordan, yeah, he was amazing, but he was also like just competitive to the point of just like no one would want to get in his way or cross him.
You can't measure that. That's all. The only way to measure that is to see it on the field, right? To see it on the film. And a guy like that is just going to be like, he's just going to will you to win. I mean, he's just going to figure it out.
And that's what he did.
just call the plays and like call your offense and let him just be. But the good thing is he doesn't press to do that. It's like he just plays naturally. And when those moments and opportunities come up, he just reacts. So it's like all the time and all the work spent, like probably as a kid, all the way up to this point, all the football that he's played, all the sports, it's like he's just out there competing. But he's out there competing to like to destroy you, basically. I mean,
Look how
to pick
he
you
talks
apart.
about Shedeur Sanders. He talks about even he didn't really talk about his cousin, but you know what I mean? Like he's highly competitive. Whether that stuff was real or not that we've seen over the summer with some of the clips, like you just hear about those guys. Like it's not something that me and you probably associate with on an everyday basis to be that competitive, but there are in that world there are guys that are that competitive.
The cool part nowadays is the competitiveness, but what college football has become with like it's a show, right? It's an entertainment. Like the amount of distractions and the things that are going on between all of the outside things that happen, right? With Sanders and the things that are going on with Cam and the news and the media, he just keeps the main thing the main thing. So when you're able to do that, like mentally, then you can execute at the highest level. When you start thinking about all those things, I guarantee he's not thinking about the Heisman. He's not thinking of any of that. He's just on to the next thing, staying in the moment and moving on to the next game because he
But
knows
you know
like,
what? To me, Ken, even if he was thinking about the Heisman, I don't actually think that's a bad thing necessarily if he's doing it the right way, meaning like he wants it so bad and would want the notoriety so much that he's willing to do anything to have the kind of season that would get him there. I don't
yeah,
think that's a bad thing. If you're thinking about it like, I can't wait to be in New York, what's going to be a great time, what a show. And that's, you're sort of, it's a distracted thing that I would have a problem with. But if it's a goal oriented, it's driving you to be your best just like winning championships, it's the one game mentality, which I understand because you got to live in the moment. But if at the end of the day, your goal is to win a national championship and you have such an overwhelming desire to make that happen that you picture it and live it and think about it every day, then to me, that's okay. I don't think that's a negative.
no, I think any great athlete, anybody that can compartmentalize things like that, and as soon as you cross that line, you're just a totally different person. That's probably how he is. So it's like, yeah, is he driven by all that? Is he driven to be probably the number one pick in the draft, to win a national championship, to prove
Well,
that he
look,
could
dude, Ken,
play at this
he
level?
said this. He said this. He didn't say it specifically to that, but I think he said this somewhere in camp. Like, I think he's out to prove that he was a guy out of high school who had one offer from Incarnate Word. Nothing against them, but like, I'm better. I'm showing all y'all that I'm better than that, and
Yeah,
you missed.
yeah. But those are the kids. Those are the guys that go the farthest.
No,
It's
those are the
not the
like
guys.
Jerry Rice, like was insane, and I don't mean this critically, like so driven and so I won't say insecure, but like just so obsessed with like not failing that he drove himself to greatness. And Michael Jordan was the same way. That's that level of craziness you have to have.
Right. And he's passionate about it though. You gotta love it. Like
Of
if you don't
course.
love the grind and you don't love like everybody's like, oh, he watches so much film. Most guys like they're gonna put in the amount of time they need to put in because
Right.
film watching can get boring. Like
Well,
sitting
it's
there and
funny.
watching the
I
whole
thought
thing.
about this, Kenny. Was you think about 5:30, and I was trying to just kind of paint a picture of Cam. I did a little post, and I probably didn't come out right. But as in hindsight, I think if you knew you put 2 hours more, if you were in at 5:30, so if you and your job or anyone's walk of life put 2 hours in before anyone else woke up, it's kind of the Kobe Bryant mentality, right? I start training at 4 a.m. because I can train again at 10 a.m. and train again at 4 p.m., right? I can get that many more sessions in, bank that many more reps, get that much more film, get that much more workouts that over 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, the gap between you and me is ginormous, but you got to be willing to put it in.
Well, the other thing too is you gotta have time management. Like you gotta understand how to process certain things. So like there's guys that go out and they just grind on the field, they grind in the weight room, they may go watch a bunch of film, but like are they really understanding and getting deep practice where they're really taking the repetitions and they're understanding and being able to apply it on a game day situation, right? Because you can put in all that work, but if you don't get over those mental hurdles and you don't get over like just going and letting your subconscious happen and play free, like a lot of those guys can't do that. So
You
he's
Phil
got that
Jackson? You Phil
ability.
Jackson with some kind of Gandhi Buddhist shit?
I've read enough books,
Hey,
maybe two.
last thing, because I got to go pick up my kids, and I told you before, the wifey's going to get on my ass. So this is just I'm just jamming this in here because I want to, which I thought you made a very interesting point about how defenses should treat Elijah Arroyo, the tight end.
It's hard. So when you look on paper, right, you'd call that 10 personnel. One tight end, one back, three
11 personnel.
receivers. Excuse me, 11. So you'd call this like
I'm
11,
getting ahead of you. You're getting ahead of
excuse me,
yourself.
11 personnel, right? So you'd say
Take
three
two,
tight.
take two, Kenny.
Yeah, all
No, I'm saying
right.
you would, so Elijah
Well,
Arroyo's in the game with 3 receivers and a back. That is 11 personnel.
yes, so you got one tight end, one back, right? But you got to treat them almost like they're in 10 personnel, like they've got four wides, because he
That's what
is
you think.
like,
That's what you think.
absolutely. I mean, he is like the Antonio Gates, Jimmy Graham, Tony Gonzalez style of tight end. That's like, it's almost like that power forward in basketball. If you were to put a power forward out there that's so athletic who can move and get up and down the court, that's that guy. And he's got great hands and great like ball skills and
And we
awareness.
saw
So
speed. We
yeah,
saw
so I
speed
mean,
chasing
so
that thing down.
and that's essentially like you look at like how the NFL drafts, right? They're going to draft by each year. They're going to look and say, who do we play in our
Matchups.
division and
Matchups,
who's
right?
our matchups, right? If I've got a 6'4" receiver, I've got a Tyreek Hill out there, like I got to get a guy that's going to guard him because we play him twice a year. So he's a matchup problem because it's like you can't put a big linebacker on him. He's going to blow right by him and he's just going to work him in option routes and man-to-man beating routes. So okay, you zone the defense, but now if you put a nickel player on him, like a safety or a corner,
He's bigger.
okay, he's bigger, but he just becomes a matchup problem, and he's a nice fit to have, like
And you can run
either on
like,
the
it's not only you're that, he's 6, I think he's 6'5", 255, who can
yeah. And you
run.
know what's
That's
crazy too?
freaky.
He was a high jumper in high school. Like he was a track athlete, high jumper. So like to have that ability to get up and get the ball and to do those things, I mean, that's a super athletic, freaky guy. And to be able to, I mean, that throw that he had down the sideline was like right over, layered
The
over. It was a
catch.
great throw. Yeah, the catch. But like for a tight end to be able to get that with that type of ball, that's impressive. I mean, he's not just running little spot routes and he's not
Little hitch,
running
little sit
hitches or
down, little out.
drags or
Yeah.
yeah, typical routes that tight ends run in their
Well,
offense.
everything that Virginia Tech did with their tight ends, just slip them, put them in motion, crack them, release them, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's what makes those guys good. Is like in space. You get them out in space and they know what to do. They can get open.
All right, Kenny Mastrole, we're paying you Cam Ward type money. You're eating up all of my NIL pie, buddy.
You're not gonna get that. You're not gonna get that banner flying over Fort Lauderdale Beach, are you?
No, you're living in a casita on my dime. Kenny, thanks, dude.
All right, it was a pleasure.
See you.